Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Maverick News Channel. Just a very short opener there. I didn't get the usual music playing, so a little bit of a technical glitch, but that's okay. We're going to jump right into things here tonight. And before we get started with today's top news stories, it's the top news stories, and Trump, I think, is in every single one of them tonight in one way or another. But I need to just make a short announcement because I think we have, I'm told, hundreds of people, at least hundreds, waiting for a broadcast tonight about the ostrich farm thing out in British Columbia. And there was some confusion about that. You're going to have to wait until tomorrow. We're not dealing with that subject matter tonight. We have actually a series of interviews, I think, coming up, dealing with the strangeness around all of that. And we're going to dig into some information that you maybe have not heard anyplace else before, some new stuff over the course of the coming week. So tune in tomorrow night for the first in a series of special reports on that bizarre Canadian story that just keeps on. I don't know. It's got wings of its own, but it doesn't really fly. I don't know what it is. It's just the most bizarre story I think I've ever covered, ever. Very strange. Anyway, we've got the world being turned upside down in other ways. So we're going to bring David Wiley in tonight to help us make sense of what's going on in Venezuela. And he'll also, I think, give us some insight into what's happening today with these peace strategy sessions that are happening over in Europe. Mark Carney taking part in that. And then we have Trump's comments and Stephen Miller's comments regarding Greenland today. And that is destabilizing as well, throwing a lot of people into a tizzy. So stay with us. We'll come right back on the other side of this and start jumping right into it. Be right back.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our question.
Well, one moment. Let me see if I can make it work. It's catching up. I promise we're going to have a broadcast.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
All right, so I think we're rocking and rolling. Let's bring David in. David Wiley coming back. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you. We started off the new year with a bang, didn't we?
Yes, to say the least. Man, there's so much happening out there every single day. Today, no exception. And there's been so much that has transpired since your last visit here that it's hard to know where to begin. So let's just begin with, I guess, the story that is still dominating headlines and probably the most significant event, the capture of Nicolas Maduro. Just share your initial thoughts with us because opinions on this vary widely.
Yeah, right there. Well, I'd say number one, you said the key part, dominating headlines. And that is exactly what this was intended to do. That was the number one objective. We're not talking about Epstein. We're not talking about tariffs. We're not talking about the U.S. economy. We're not talking about the failure to get peace in Ukraine. We're talking about the successful capture of Maduro, right? Headlines. So that was it. This was a good headline for Trump. So for them, that's mission accomplished. But what really changed? The Chavista regime is still in charge of Venezuela. So the vice president has stepped up. There's no real change today. So it's kind of business as usual in Venezuela. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. And not a lot has changed there. We're not going to see any stop or slow down to drug trafficking. It may even intensify. I expect, battles that will come from the cartels and others, as they will see this as more of an opportunity, to power grab and sculpt things to their liking. But as far as real change in Venezuela, this isn't it. Not yet. Doesn't mean it won't. For Trump, this is also, it's exactly as you're seeing it. It's a threat to other world leaders. I guarantee you that Putin sat up. This was not expected. If you're the Castro regime in Cuba, you have to be sweating right now really bad, because if they can do that to Venezuela, they could probably do something easier in Cuba. And of course, it's, the bad part, it's causing a lot of trouble with America's allies, with Canada, with Denmark, with other European countries. Absolutely, this was a violation of international law. Now, Quebec, United States government has never said that we have to abide by international law. We do it typically as a convenience, but it is not part of our own legal system. So it's not really a change. Was this legal? I dove into that a bit, and technically, yes. Maduro was not a recognized president of Venezuela. Therefore, under U.S. law, it's not doing anything to the sovereign head of another government. This is a criminal who is wanted on an indictment. Could it be considered an act of war for which he notified Congress? It could be, but existing authorizations for the use of military force, AUMF, several of those have no end date and could apply. So, I know there's talk of impeachment from some of the talking heads on the left, but I just don't see it for this. And so, but, we come back to it. Mission accomplished. We're talking about this. We're not talking about the things that are really unfavorable to the Trump administration. We're talking about the successful capture of a wanted criminal.
Yeah, I see it framed that way by many people. Here in Canada, I know that it has raised or elevated concerns, I should say, with regard to the 51st state talk, and just the way that it seems to threaten the leaders of other countries potentially. It seems to be it's viewed as an assault on sovereignty and international law and the rules-based international order, if you will. And it looks like you're frozen up there, but I can hear you okay. So it in that respect, it is very destabilizing, and I think it's destabilizing relations between the United States and its allies further tonight. You have further comments on that?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree on that. With Trump administration does not care about international law. They do not care about an international rules-based order. This is nothing to them. And the problem for if you're a European ally and you're trying to make some kind of legal agreement to work with the U.S., now you say, well, what does that mean in the future? The U.S. has an election. Everything can change again. So all the long-term agreements become worth less. And this is not good for America. This is how our, trade agreements depend on. And, so in that, it's going to be a bad turn. So while Trump is enjoying a big boost in the news right now, I don't know that this is really going to be the boost that he wanted, coming, 10 months from now when we have the midterm elections.
Is it a boost for him, though, David? Because I think there have been some polls out there that show support for this among the American public is maybe only around 30%. And I think that maybe is a reflection of concerns about the potential for this resulting in American boots on the ground in Venezuela.
Yeah. No, Americans are very concerned. I looked even narrowing it down into the Hispanic demographic, which is most likely to support this. And only about 57% do. People are very concerned, and rightfully so, because the question it begs is what happens next? Do we go in with ground troops? We don't want that. We absolutely don't want that. And Americans shouldn't want that, because that's going to be a huge cost in both lives and money. China, I'm sure, wants that because they want us to be involved and distracted other places. But Americans don't, and it's not in America's interest to get embroiled in an occupation of Venezuela.
And we're looking at, I mean, you say it's sort of business as usual there, but unless I'm missing something, it didn't seem like business as usual overnight, because there was gunfire in the streets, and there's video that I've seen of some drones of some kind flying over the Caracas, and shots being fired at those. And it seems like that stuff has been confirmed as authentic, but it's not clear what was really going on or what that was about. Do you have any insight into that?
Well, American government has denied involvement, and I absolutely believe that, because this is too low scale for that. There's several power players in Venezuela. You have the socialist Chavista government itself, you have the cartels, and you have the Cuban forces, which are there at the invitation of the socialist government to help enforce the peace, pacify the people, and suppress them against the government. We don't really know who was doing what. My most likely bet would be that it was the government, dispersing those who were celebrating the capture of Maduro and enforcing their rule. But easily could have been an attempted cartel power grab, or Cuban mercenaries acting independently to suppress the people. We don't know. Time will tell us the real story. But, there has been, since the Chavista government took over, a lot of violence in Venezuela. So I don't believe that this is really different. This is still kind of within the normal scope of violence that happens in Venezuela, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I can't say. I don't know. It seems like what we have witnessed overnight is the result of in my immediate view, the result of destabilization, a bit of a vacuum being created, where you maybe have some people who are seeing this as an opportunity to do whatever it is that they think they might be able to do politically through violence. Maybe there was also speculation that it might have been something resulting out of confusion, because the Venezuelan security forces around the palace weren't communicating properly, and maybe it was their own drones they were shooting at. It all seemed very odd to me overnight.
It does. My most likely bet is still that it's the socialist government itself. There's no freedom of expression in Venezuela. And there have been protesters. There have been people speaking out against the government, and that's strictly not allowed by the Chavista government. So my bet would be it was government suppression of the people. Whether there are other forces involved, who knows?
Well, the new interim leader or new president, I don't know how to refer to the new president. It depends. I guess it depends on what happens to Maduro. But for now, we have the remnants, or the rest of the regime still in place there. See, I think you're right. And I did mention this, like, what was people are talking about regime change, but the regime is still there. It's just that the big guy's not there anymore. And then Trump is saying that Trump is going to run. Rubio says they're going to run things temporarily. What do you make of those statements, and how does that mesh with where we're at? I mean, do you think there will be elections, or will this just be hands off for the US from now on, or what?
And notably, Trump is not even recognizing the rightfully elected leader of Venezuela, because there were elections in Venezuela. Maduro lost. By all international observers, Maduro lost overwhelmingly, right? And so he had the elections nullified and took control anyways. And now his appointed, not elected vice president is seizing dictatorial power after him. So it's just a succession of the same government. As far as discussions that they're going to, run the oil and everything, it's wishful thinking. Without boots on the ground, you can't actually control that. We can try and bully the government into it. But honestly, I don't see that happening because, again, I mentioned those Cuban mercenaries that are there in Venezuela. They're absolutely not going to allow that. So in order for that to happen, somebody has to push those Cuban mercenaries out, whether that's the Chavista government. I don't see that happening because those mercenaries are there to help suppress the people and keep the government in power, or some outside force. And absent that, I just don't see it happening. But furthermore, the oil industry in Venezuela has largely been destroyed. It's not in the position where it can have outputs like it used to. I mean, they're still pumping oil, right? They're still pumping heavy crude out of Venezuela, but not nearly in the numbers in volume and dollars that they were before the socialist government. To get back to that, there has to be some major investments, and you can't have that with the current government security situation, right?
But isn't Trump has been talking about that, though, bringing those U.S. oil companies in. He says they're going to spend billions of dollars in there, and that can only happen if you have stability. They're not going to invest anything if, they're worried about rebels, and violence and maybe losing their investment again in Venezuela.
Yeah, absolutely. Trump's talking about that, and it sounds good. And I think it's about as likely as Mexico paying for the wall. Right.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a good analysis. Yeah. Or
without boots on the ground, it's just not happening. And Americans do not support boots on the ground. And politically, that would be a disaster for Trump. I don't see that happening. Boots on the ground is going to mean that Americans start coming back in body bags. It's going to mean probably at least $1 trillion of spending to support an occupation of Venezuela. Americans are not going to support that. And it's a midterm election year. Trump's big focus, I mean, if you're paying attention, he's been talking about the midterms and the critical importance of midterms. And this was a great headline generator for the month. Successful effort and capture of a wanted criminal, right? But I don't honestly believe it's going to go much further than that. Certainly not in the direction of Venezuela. Now, if you're in Cuba, again, you absolutely should be sweating bullets right now, because that would be much easier for them to pull off than an occupation of Venezuela. We already have a toehold in Cuba. We could go in there with a military occupation without too much difficulty. And a lot of Americans would support that.
A lot of Americans would support going into Cuba with a military operation to change the government.
Certainly the Cuban American population of Miami. Absolutely.
I can understand
now,
that.
Overall, across America, is that going to get a boost? I wouldn't bet on that. No. Mm-hmm. But an invasion of Cuba would certainly see a popularity boost with some demographics of Americans. I don't think it's necessarily going to help them with the midterms, and very likely could hurt. But it's not outside the realm of possibility, and you have to have it in your playbook if you're the Trump administration right now.
Okay. So, in your view, this was primarily a photo op.
Yeah, that's accurate. Older, description might be, wagging the dog or whatever. It was a great way to get them to change the topic. Congress came back in session this week after the Christmas break and ready to deal with the Epstein files. And now they've got a different, hotter topic to talk about. So for Trump, that's a win. That's a huge win. Yeah, because, he does not want that to be the topic.
And yet it's followed up with rhetoric today again about Greenland.
Yep.
And Stephen Miller even saying today that the United States has the right to take Greenland. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but I think he used the word the right to do it. So I can understand why a lot of other world leaders are nervous.
That's really inflammatory and damaging talk. It's not good for America, but again, it keeps headlines away. And honestly, it's not going to happen. That would require, any military action on Greenland or Canada would require congressional authorization. Americans are not going to support it. Congress is not going to support it. And Canada and Denmark are part of NATO. It would be a military disaster to attempt anything. Yeah, so it's good for talk. It's good to generate media headlines. But in my opinion, it's just not realistic. But Stephen Miller does like to say inflammatory things.
Don't you think there's some people around Trump, and maybe even Trump himself, who really do want to do this? Who really do want to take Greenland?
I have no doubt Stephen Miller would probably like taking Greenland, but it's not going to happen. You've got cooler heads. I don't see Marco Rubio. There's a line to be drawn. He knows what would happen. There are still reasonable people in the administration. Not
I
Stephen
hope so.
Miller.
I'm sure you're aware. Like I'm not as optimistic as you. I'm very worried about everything that's going on. I hope you're right.
No, understandably so, right? Yeah. This is not normal talk coming out of America, right? No. This is, it's dangerous times. It's very damaging. None of it's good for us, right? Even if nothing happens, we've still damaged relations between countries. We've still discouraged investment by foreign businesses in America. If you're a Canadian, does this make you want to travel to the U.S. and have a vacation down south? Absolutely not.
No.
Right?
I can also tell you from what I've been hearing from some Canadians who have been venturing south to the U.S. that some of them have been sort of treated poorly. I was talking to my parents who were talking to somebody who pulled into a gas station somewhere in Michigan near the Ambassador Bridge to get gas, and the gas station attendant refused to sell them gasoline because they had Ontario plates.
Yeah.
No gas for Canadians around here. So it's really unfortunate. I hope no Canadians treat any Americans that way up here, because this is crazy stuff going on.
Yeah.
But anyway,
that is, and that's another consequence of what's going on, is that everyone feels free to let their bigotry fly, right? Don't like Canadians, and normally you might keep that to yourself, but now you feel great about airing it, at least until if you don't like Canadians and your business is along the northern border, you're probably not going to make it in business for too much longer. You're certainly not going to do as well as your competitors.
Well, yeah, and it saddened me to see the distillery in Kentucky shutting down, in part because of the tariff war, the trade war, where Ontario is not selling U.S. liquor anymore in the government approved liquor stores. it's just damaging on both sides. So it just seems very counterproductive to me, the whole thing.
It absolutely is. And look, this is a big midterm election year. Everything is about elections for the most part, starting this month. And, it's a short-term gain, changing the headlines. But in the long term, come November, I think this hurts, because everything hurting the economy hurts Americans and makes them less inclined to vote Republican.
So, I mean, it just seems like a heck of a huge effort and expense to the U.S. taxpayers to bring this massive armada to the shores of Venezuela, all to scoop up Maduro, one guy, and then suffer, I think, some damage politically, damaging relations even between the U.S. and allies. But hey, man, it's Trump. I don't understand a lot of what he does.
I expect another 11 months of distractions. We don't know what the price tag was on this operation. We probably won't know for some months still. I'm curious when Congress will get around to asking that and making it public. But I expect that, come next month, there will be some other new distraction. Because it's a lot of ongoing bad news, and Trump needs to change the topic.
Because of the efforts to try and smear him with the Epstein stuff, and he wants to turn the page, I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think there's validity to a lot of that. But everything going on there ties into everything else, and there's
Absolutely.
so much else going on today that it's crazy. Did you take note of anything that came out of the meeting of the Coalition of the Willing today over in Europe? And I guess they're talking about real security guarantees of some kind now. What do you make of that?
Yeah, no, actually we got some pretty big news, and that was the commitment from France and the UK to put troops on the ground in Ukraine after a peace agreement. And that is really big news. Those are the real security guarantees that Ukraine has been looking for. And these are the type of security guarantees which will deter future Russian aggression. However,
David, let's pause for just a moment. I'm going to run a little transition because your video is frozen. We can hear you, but your video is frozen. So maybe what I can get you to do is just sign out, sign back in while the transition is running, and then maybe we'll be able to see your smiling face in full motion, 30 frames per second video when we come back. Okay, folks, I'm going to run this little promo and we'll see you on the other side.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, defending free speech, Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, there we go. I think we're in better shape now.
Hopefully you're seeing me in living color now.
Yeah, we are. I think maybe it's even just on a limited scale anyway. I think some people were seeing you in full motion and others not. But in any event, you're back and we're live and talking about the situation in Ukraine. And again, I guess this is the most substantial commitment to some sort of serious security guarantee for Ukraine that maybe the Coalition of the Willing is putting on the table so they can take that forward into some sort of negotiation with Putin?
Yeah, now for negotiations, I think this actually kind of hurts. I'll get to that in a bit. Let's start with the good aspect of this. This is a real peace guarantee. And for Ukrainians, that is good news that when there's an end to this, it'll be a real end, right? It's not going to be like Minsk 1 and 2 and all the, I don't remember how many, but close to 30 violated peace agreements that Ukraine has had with Russia here. And so they've been meaningless. But troops on the ground, especially from significant military powers like France and the UK, who are both nuclear powers, those are serious security guarantees. So that means there will be a lasting peace. Ukraine needs that. However, as I said, there's a bad side to this. Putin's ambitions have not changed. What this tells him is will not be a round 3 to this fight. He has to win this war. Wherever he ends it, he's not getting more, right? So he's going to want to push this war. He wasn't willing to sign a ceasefire agreement before this. He's going to be even less willing now with this news. So, yeah, I don't, there were some hopes maybe for a temporary ceasefire, but I think those are gone. What this does mean is that, there is a path for a real serious peace agreement now, for a real peace where there's no more wars between Ukraine and Russia. Yeah. But how we get to that ceasefire, how we get to that peace, to me, the only solution is to arm Ukraine, right? We have to enable the Ukrainians to really fight back. And in other news, Ukraine just got 80 more American tanks, Abrams N1A1s. This was put into agreement back in 2023 during the Biden administration, but they were just delivered, right? So there is continuing armament, not on the scale that's needed, but this is showing that the West is still there, that the United States is still honoring agreements that were made with the prior administration. And for Russia, this is a bad sign.
How long do those agreements under Biden continue into the current administration? And will things change? Do you expect things to change because of Trump's policies beginning to take effect in a more substantial way as time marches on?
Things will change. Look, these are contracts that were put in place with military suppliers, and some of them may take, even though they were put in during the Biden administration, they may take 5 years to even start rolling. So we will see things continue to just get started being delivered to Ukraine, even when Trump is out of office, right? And we can expect these contracts, some of them will go on for 10 years past the point they were put into place. Absent Congress doing anything about it, that's what's going to happen. That money was spent. It was put into place. It's now U.S. law. And for the president or secretary of defense to not do it would be an impeachable offense, not following the law of Congress. So they have to do it. There are some exceptions. Pete Hegseth has redirected some munitions that were supposed to go to Ukraine to the Middle East and so on. But in the end, those still have to be replaced. He will still eventually have to deliver them to Ukraine. It's just a delay. Not everything under the U.S. system of government, not everything's at the discretion of the president. Congress is the one that really decides how U.S. tax money is spent. So if they decide to spend the money and something goes to Ukraine, then it has to go to Ukraine. And only Congress can decide otherwise.
So what we're seeing today, I guess, is a clear sign that European countries, in particular France and the UK, are getting serious about taking more of a forward role in the Ukraine conflict.
Absolutely. And the U.S. is still there living up to its military commitments, right? So contracts are still being met. And that is some assurance for Ukraine, right? Because a lot of that is ammunition that they need to stay in the fight for years. And if that's coming, then, right now this is a war of attrition. Ukraine is winning the war of attrition, and they're going to have the supplies to keep doing that. That's what Russia really doesn't want to see. They saw a foreign ally of Putin was taken out. Other big news from Venezuela, Russia had delivered thousands of anti-aircraft systems to Venezuela that was supposed to protect them from the U.S. And we just showed them that was worthless, right? And so if you are a Putin ally, and right now, make no mistake, Russia would already be out of this war if it wasn't for foreign help from Iran, from North Korea, and China. And what this capture of Maduro has shown is that Russian military systems cannot protect you from the U.S., right? So if you are, say, governments of Mali, Burkina Faso, which are allied with Russia, or say Kazakhstan or any other place, Russian security assurances are worth even less today than they were last week. And they were not looking good last week.
Yeah, I think there were Chinese defensive systems in there as well that put to the test and really didn't live up to their billing.
Yeah, they were, but it's not really so much on China. The main defense systems were Russia. It wasn't really the latest and greatest Chinese stuff either. So I don't see China really losing any prestige here. There was no expectation that the systems China sold to Venezuela would stop the U.S. So China is still looking pretty good. If you are, say, a government in Asia and you want to depend on something, that the best systems that Russia will sell aren't going to save you from Americans, but maybe the latest and greatest Chinese systems will. So, if you are looking to align yourself with some of the leading military providers, you're looking at the U.S., you're looking at Europe, you're looking at China. You're definitely not looking to Russia. Russia security guarantees are not worth anything right now.
Yeah, somebody asked me what I thought Putin's position was on Maduro, and I said that I think he gave him up. That's sort of my take on it, because as an ally of Russia, I think there was some expectation that from Maduro and his government that Putin would protect him, but he was either not in a position to or didn't try to. Either way, it seemed like, and I mean, Venezuela isn't a major obstacle for the U.S. military, so it's not surprising at all that they went in there and just did what they wanted to do. They have the technology and the capability of doing that, and as much as it's about the hardware, I think it was even more about the intelligence beforehand to lay the groundwork, come up with the plan, and then send in the guys who kick down the door and arrest the guy, right? So,
yeah,
without
absolutely.
all that, yeah,
we knew where Maduro was. We knew when and how to grab him, and we did. We executed it perfectly. Putin tried the same thing. He tried to capture Zelensky, right? And that was disaster. Russian special forces got massacred at the Hostomel airport. So there's no win here for Putin. This is a disaster for them on the political scene, on the military scene. It's just more bad news. It is not bad news that is going to drive them to any kind of peace agreement, though. I just see Putin getting into more of a corner and more desperation sinking in. And he's going to probably, my guess would be, he's going to double down on China. He's going to turn to them because they are still in a position to help him further. But we'll see what he has to offer them. He has to go to them as a beggar, not as a partner.
And what do you make of the comments Trump has been making? I guess even really the warnings to Colombia, for instance, which has been engaging in a lot of anti-American rhetoric since all of this has happened in Venezuela, concerns about, railing against the U.S. and Trump, I think, putting the leader of Colombia on notice too.
Yeah, now I disagree with that framing that it's been anti-American rhetoric. I haven't seen anything that I would say is anti-American. There's definitely been very anti-Trump rhetoric, especially ever since they blew up boats of Colombian nationals, right? So some of those boats in the Caribbean that were blown up were not Venezuelan. They were Colombian, right? And so that was a very bad move, which has continued escalation. And now there's continued escalation in Venezuela. Colombia is a close partner of the United States. There are U.S. military bases in Colombia. They are a very close trading partner. And for Trump's agenda of getting away from China, Colombia has been one of the major places to outsource from China to Colombia and Mexico. That's where a lot of manufacturing has been moving. And so this is very bad for the U.S. on a trade perspective again. We need good relations with Colombia. And this is going to be very damaging to the U.S. Economically, for business, and it's more bad news for America. As far as going into Colombia militarily, I don't know if that's realistic. The leader of Colombia is democratically elected. He's not a wanted criminal like Maduro. I don't see there being congressional authorization, and that would be a very bad move by the Trump administration. Definitely he wants to. There's bad blood between the leaders there. But acting on that is going to get this administration in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, as I listen to you, I find your take on things more nuanced, and the language, the words you're choosing, which are very important. I think that it's a fair analysis, and I'm seeing the same kind of thing. I mean, I honestly, I'm not as optimistic as you at all, but I as I say, I hope you're right, because I just do. And but I see even our prime minister here in Canada today choosing his words very carefully. He's not joining in with the others who are, expressing extreme concern about the appearance or the threat, the appearance of a threat on the sovereignty of other countries because of what Trump has done in Venezuela. But I hear other people in other parts of the government and people of consequence expressing extreme concern, including Bob Ray, who is I think he just stepped aside as Canada's ambassador to the UN, saying that, the world doesn't work this way. You can't just declare that you can do whatever you want to do in your own hemisphere or in this half of the world, and ignore international law, saying, Canada could do the exact same thing. But I guess then it really just comes down to, and he didn't say this, I'm saying this, but if that's where we're going with all of this, then it really does just come down to the law of the jungle, and whoever has the biggest guns, the most bombs, I guess. And hopefully that's not where we're going, because that's not the way that I ever viewed the United States. I hope that's not what we have here.
Yeah, no, it isn't. It's not only not the way the world works, it's not the way the United States works. I know it's a little confusing because we have a Congress that's been going along with whatever Trump wanted for the last year. But now we're into a congressional reelection year, right? So it's going to be a little different. They're looking back a lot more to the home district and seeing what the voters want, right? And they will split with the leader of their party if that's what the voters at home want, if that's what gets them reelected. Because if they're not reelected, then it doesn't really matter. And, similar thing with Colombia. To go back there, Colombia is a democracy. Trump has killed Colombian nationals in what is, to be blunt, an international war crime, to attack people at sea, right? And then to attack them again when their boats are destroyed and damaged. Colombia is not at war with the U.S. We are military allies. We are trading partners. We have very close relations. But now, the administration of the United States government has killed citizens of Colombia, and we have attacked and destabilized their next door neighbor, which is going to cause more refugees from Venezuela into Colombia. And they've had a lot of them. This is a problem for them. And it's going to cause the cartels that Colombia has been fighting to, get more violent, right? Across both sides of that border. So this is nothing but problems for Colombia. And if you are an elected official in Colombia, you have to take a position against this. You have no choice because the people of Colombia are going to demand it. But I am just hoping that long term, the relations between the governments of Colombia and the United States can be strengthened again, because it is a good relationship, has been a good relationship for both countries.
So to just kind of simplify what you've said, to make it, I guess, understandable, is you don't think that it was, and if I'm getting this wrong at all, you correct me, but if I'm understanding what you're saying, it probably wasn't the best thing for the United States to go into Venezuela and do this, and to take Maduro from Venezuela and implant him in a jail cell up in the Southern District of New York. But that being said, we shouldn't worry too much up here in Kazakhstan, because you guys are not coming to invade us. And Greenland is still, in your view, not a serious thing.
No. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I wouldn't, I might characterize Maduro, short term, it's great for this administration, right? It's a victory. And it's going to help him with Hispanics who've been really upset at ICE actions. They just changed their positions on Venezuelan refugees. Before, when they were subject to ICE enforcement and pushing them all out, now they just said, "Oh, if you're Venezuelan, you can stay." Right? So it gave them an excuse to save face, changes the position to, so that they can change to a more popular position. But there's unintended consequences, which you're pointing out with Colombia. There's going to be long-term costs. And I don't think this administration really thought through what's this going to look like 10 months down the road. They just looked at what they needed right now.
I don't think Trump, I don't think he had a plan other than this, just go in and do this. And I don't think there's a plan beyond that. And I also don't think this is good for that reason. I don't think this is good for the people of Venezuela, because just overnight we've seen gunfire in the streets and things flying around up in the air and shots being taken at those. Nobody knows what the hell is going on. And people are lined up, I think, just trying to get water because they're worried about what's coming tomorrow. And I think it's damaging the image and reputation of the United States around the world. I don't think it's a good thing. And I don't think he's got a plan.
Yeah.
So what comes next? We don't even know.
Yeah, we don't know. And, the media is going to resume its normal course in the weeks ahead, unless there's a new distraction. And so I think right now, if you're the Trump administration, you have to be planning that new distraction. And what is it going to be? Hopefully they can do something a little better. It's great that Maduro's gone, but without some real change on the ground in the administration, all the celebration by the Venezuelan people is going to be, unfortunately, I think, short-lived.
Yeah, this administration under Trump, it's been designed, engineered for a news cycle, and this will fade away unless there's some major development on the ground in Venezuela. It will fade away from the news in the next probably few days. Unless something major happens, and it'll resurface from time to time as Maduro makes his way through court. But I don't even think, after a while, even that won't generate massive numbers of viewers and clicks, because people will just, I think, tire of it after a while. It'll make some headlines, but unless something happens within Venezuela where the United States is directly involved, it'll just fade from the public interest to some degree. And I don't think that's good for the people there either, because just because it isn't in the news doesn't mean that you still don't have instability and problems within that country. And I don't think this solved anything for the people of Venezuela. And I'm not even sure it solved anything for the U.S. because, as you said, the drugs are still going to flow.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I will keep an eye on that I think this administration may seek to do is an oil embargo of Venezuela. Venezuela has been a big key part of the Russian shadow fleet of oil tankers. So Trump has the legal authorization to go after those tankers if he chooses. His rhetoric has kind of indicated that. Now, so far, for his first year, he has stayed away from going after those Russian oil tankers anywhere in the world. But now it looks like he may go after them in Venezuela. This may help, this may hurt, depending on how the Trump administration does it. This is a two-edged sword that can cut both ways, because there's two things to watch here. One, going after the tankers themselves, that is fine as long as the oil is still flowing, right? So a total embargo would be disastrous for the U.S. It would backfire and it would help Russia. It would help Russia because the price of oil would go up, right? And they desperately need that. That would help their shadow fleet in other parts of the world that the U.S. has not gone after. However, if we do target just the Russian vessels, this will weaken the regime in Venezuela. This will hurt Putin substantially. And if it doesn't affect the price of oil, if other tankers are still going out of there, then it's going to hurt Russia even more. So we'll see what happens. That is, if they continue on Venezuela, that's the next move I expect them to make. But again, how you do it, what form of embargo, that's going to make the difference.
And everybody keeps talking about he has, this is legal, or he's got the authority to do this or to do that. But all of that is predicated on what's going on in U.S. courts, not international law.
Yes.
I even the charges on the gun charges against Maduro, I don't even understand it. He's not allowed to possess weapons inside another country, inside Venezuela, and he's charged with weapons offenses. It's all U.S. law. And yep. I don't see how that has any jurisdiction or validity in any other country, any other sovereign country, even if he's wanted on charges in the U.S. I don't see how any of this is legal or lawful on the high seas based on just U.S. laws. Even what happened with Noriega, I mean, that was just based on a memo from Bill Barr. And that's all U.S. law again. So what are your views on that? I'm struggling with this, man.
Yeah, they successfully prosecuted Noriega, so there's a precedent there. But as you said, this happened in another country. They're going to prosecute him in New York. I'll be watching this closely because this is a very complicated area of law. I am not an expert. I'm curious to see how it plays out. If he gets the conviction, that will help Trump. If it's all for nothing, it's going to really hurt him this year. So he's got a lot riding on it. The New York court district is not going to be favorable to Trump, right? They're going to play this by the book. Curious to see what kind of jury we get, because a lot of modern New York juries may be sympathetic to Venezuela. So,
well, there's a legal. I think there's a legal precedent that was set. I can't remember the name of it, that allows people who were captured, even illegally. It doesn't matter like how they come before the court. They allow the court case to proceed anyway, and that's again U.S. law, because and that acknowledges that, in this case, I think they'll use that and that will acknowledge that Maduro was actually apprehended in an illegal international operation, military operation, but they won't care. And they'll put him on trial in the U.S. under U.S. law anyway.
Yeah, they'll still put him on trial. It does make a difference, though, because it can be used to limit and suppress the evidence that is presented. Right? So if...
Yeah? Oh, well, maybe. Okay.
Yeah. So, like, if they raided his place while they captured him and, took evidence of supposed crimes, they likely won't be able to use that if the manner of the arrest is considered illegal. They'll have to just use whatever evidence they have.
Okay. What else? It's just been again, they're flooding the zone with stuff. It's hard to keep up with it all, David. What else would you like to focus on tonight? Because there's so much going on, and I know that you're pretty involved in the stuff with Ukraine on your end.
Yeah, in particular, Russia, right? So Russia is the major actor. They're getting really desperate, and we need a serious endgame proposal from the Western powers. Canada is certainly part of that, right? Ukraine has enough really to hold on and stay in the fight. That's not enough, and that's just going to make Russia more dangerous for all the rest of us, right? There really needs to be a plan from the West to put this war to a close, to hopefully kick Putin out of Ukraine, because anything less is going to have bad repercussions for the West. So I am not seeing that plan, right? So these security guarantees, those are great. That's great post-war, and I'm glad that we're looking to things post-war. But the component that's missing right now is ending the war and pushing Russia back to within its own borders. And I'm not seeing that yet. So where's the end game? How do we get there? Anyone could be proposing that. That can come from Canada. That can come from the U.S. That can come from the UK, France. But we need somebody to put forth the plan, a real plan to how to win this war.
Well, that means more weapons. That means more money, and that has to come from somebody, Europe or the U.S., unless you can bleed the Russian economy to the point where it hurts too much and Putin has to end it for economic and or political reasons. Hitting the Russian oil is a big part of that, I guess. So that's having an impact for sure. I think the economy there is, from what I'm seeing, and maybe you can comment on this, is suffering. You're getting, rising energy costs, inflation. I think Russians are also seeing the attacks within their own borders. And I don't think any Russians were expecting any of that when this whole thing began.
I mean, yes, the Russian economy is suffering, but, it's not the oligarchs and Putin who are suffering. It's the people of Russia. And so to the people making decisions, it doesn't matter. The little people are there to bleed and suffer for them so that they can have, their good, happy lives. And until it gets personal, it's all good. I will agree with you. I want to make a little adjustment, because I agree with you that most likely the end of this war is going to come through weapons. I do think there's another option. I think it's unlikely, but I think if we could separate China and Russia, then I think Russia's war would collapse, right? So I don't know what could diplomatically be offered to China to make that happen. That is acceptable to Western countries. But if we could split them apart, then it wouldn't even take more weapons, because China really is Russia's lifeline right now.
Also seeing instability in the streets in Iran. The government there under pressure because of massive protests, and then Trump even speaking up within the last week saying, if you touch any of those protesters. If you kill any of those protesters, we'll become involved in that. And I mean, there's more rhetoric coming from the White House again. And Iran has been supplying Russia with drones. What do you make of all that? It seems like all this stuff is gelling all at the same time.
Yeah, and it is. So previously, when this isn't the first uprising like this, and Venezuela has been one of the countries that has sent forces to Iran to help suppress the people. So that's part of the reason for this. It's very opportune. All of those forces are being recalled back to Venezuela. Venezuela needs them at home. But Russia has been sending in plane loads of troops and supplies. They're keeping Iran there. They are suppressing and killing the people again, unfortunately. And, unfortunately, I don't think that the U.S. is going to get involved in Iran like we need to. And that would be, the same thing, being the arsenal of democracy and enabling people to fight back. But that's not happening, and I don't see that happening.
Okay, so you would like to see intervention in Iran? I mean, there's been conflict between Iran and the United States for decades.
Yeah, that intervention word is very dangerous. I don't want to see U.S. troops in Iran, right? Invasions are very dangerous, very costly. I don't want to see more people die. I do want the Iranian people to be able to rule themselves and defend themselves. So I would support arming the people who want to fight back, right? Those who would be free should themselves strike the first blow. Absolutely. We should be arming Ukraine. We should be arming the people of Iran. Those who are willing to fight for their own countries, for their own freedoms, we should be enabling them to do so. Because if everybody else is able to live free, then we are more able to live free, right? We wouldn't be in all of this if Russia itself was a free country. If the Russian people were free, then they wouldn't be getting sent off to wars. They wouldn't be threatening the U.S., and make no mistake, as all this rhetoric about Greenland shows, we are clearly threatened by Russia. So is Canada, right? Anyone who's a neighbor of Russia is threatened by them because, they're greedy psychopaths who want more through violence. And if their people were free, that wouldn't be the case. So all of us can be more free, not have to worry about all this military spending as much if everyone else was free.
So I'm also seeing some posts, I think primarily pro-Russian social media accounts, especially on X, talking about, I think there was one about 16 ships from Brazil, China, Russia that are trying to do an end run around the blockade on Venezuela. And you talked about Trump maybe going after Russian flagged vessels carrying oil. It looks like I don't even know if these posts are real or accurate. It certainly would be a possible flashpoint if you had a convoy of ships that might be attacked by the U.S. or intercepted or boarded. I don't know if it's propaganda or if it's real. Do you know anything about that? Have you heard anything about that? And what are your thoughts?
Trump and Rubio have definitely, threatened. They've talked about these ships. And I personally believe that they should go after these ships, specifically the Russian ships, right? They are covered under existing U.S. sanctions. They have legal authority to go after them. I would not widen the scope to other Venezuelan ships. Again, we got to let some oil flow out of that country. We got to keep the price of oil down. But go after the Russian ships. We have good cause and reason to do so. And that will put pressure both on the socialist regime in Venezuela and also the Russian government.
Okay. And I don't know where that goes. Speaking of the propaganda, we saw that. I mentioned this last night. We saw that the story about the drone attack from Ukraine to assassinate Putin. And from the beginning, I said, this is just propaganda. It's not real. It's not true. But then even Trump came out and said, oh, Putin told me in a phone call that they tried to kill him. And I was really angry about it. And that gave the story legs and some degree of legitimacy. But then I think it was yesterday or the day before, maybe, he comes out, walks it back and says, actually, our intelligence indicates that it didn't happen. And so I don't believe that it happened. But that didn't get anywhere near as much coverage or traction as his initial statement saying that really made me angry and they shouldn't be doing that. I just throw it out to you because it's like, it just shows how effective the propaganda machine can be, because they put that story out. To me, it had all the earmarks of a Russia propaganda campaign. Putin was using it to try to gain political leverage against Zelensky, and maybe even create the conditions where they could justify going after Zelensky and killing him. And I could tell that it was just not true. But then Trump comes out, takes the bait because he has that phone call before he meets with Zelensky, and it's like, well, what'd you try to kill the guy for? And it wasn't even true. But that story, I'm sure that far more people believe that it did happen because it got far more coverage to begin with than him retracting what he said. What kind of impact do you think that had?
I mean, you're exactly right. The key thing also was that the timing of what the damage did. So Zelensky was meeting with Trump. This propaganda piece was put right out there at that time so that no big deals came out of that meeting between Zelensky and Trump. For Russia, that's mission accomplished. And even Trump said on his follow-up comment, well, thank goodness we didn't give them tomahawks, right?
Yep.
Well, none of it happened, so you should have given them tomahawks, right? And there are Republican Congress members saying that we should be giving them tomahawks. So I'm glad that's out there. And I still think that this year we're going to see a lot more support go through for Ukraine on a discharge petition in the House, because these Republicans have to. Trump is making all these Republican districts underwater as far as elections. A lot of Republicans are looking to lose their House elections because they are attached to the name Trump. And the way they're going to have to get out from under that is to oppose Trump on popular issues. There's two of those issues, particularly for Republicans to distance themselves from Trump's unpopularity. Number one is the Epstein files, and number two is Ukraine. So I really expect that this year we're going to see a lot more regardless. This is just going to weaken Trump's stance as a negotiator. Eventually, they're going to learn to go around Trump and go directly to Congress. And Congress is going to enable it because they want to get reelected. And Republicans, if they're being strategically smart, would embrace it. There's just Trump can't. There's something in his way, and this is just a position that he feels he cannot take. I believe a lot of it's due to a personal animosity he has with Zelensky himself. But in other news, Zelensky right now is really reshuffling his own administration cabinet. A lot of seats changing. And I think he's trying to, in some ways, some of those appointments are to make himself more favorable with the Trump administration. He's trying to bridge that divide and get to a peace agreement.
Yeah, there's no love lost, I don't think, between Zelensky and Trump. Trump doesn't like him. Let's just be straight up.
The irony is that in many ways they're a lot alike. But
I don't know. I don't know. I don't think there's anybody that can compare to Trump. He's just he's such a, what's the word? Dynamic figure.
They're both very wealthy. They're used to getting their own way. They're both media personalities. They were kind of TV celebrities before they became politicians. So that they have that similar background. They approach their own people and foreigners kind of in a similar style. And I think that's part of why they don't get along.
I'm gonna play a couple of these clips that I referred to earlier for you, and I'll get you to so that you hear them in full context, or at least in a soundbite full context. Here's Bob Ray on CBC Power and Politics up here in Canada. Was the Canadian ambassador to the UN just very recently. Let me just roll this for you.
The State Department put this out on social media today, saying this is our hemisphere. So you see that. I mean, that is not just our country, our self-interest. It is the whole geographic region of spanning multiple continents.
Yeah, but with great respect to the State Department, David, this is our hemisphere. I could put out a little thing on YouTube saying this is my hemisphere. This is our hemisphere. Like, what the hell is this? You can't unilaterally declare that you have unique jurisdiction over an entire half of the world, and all the people who live in that half of the world just have to put up or shut up. And that's not how the world works.
The State Department put this out.
So that's him. You kind of commented on it before, but I don't think that Bob Ray, when he was the UN ambassador, would have been that blunt. Now that he's not in that position, he has a little more freedom to say what he's thinking himself, and he's coming out with those words. I'll let you comment if you want, and I'm going to play what Mark Carney said today, which is more nuanced.
Yeah, I've got two ways of looking at this. One's bad and the other's worse.
Oh, great.
I'll start with the worse and move on to optimistic. The worse is that this is kind of a Putin way of looking at this, which is seeing socialist spheres of interest, right? So the Russian sphere of interest, these are our neighbors, these are under our control, those are your neighbors, they're under your control.
Yeah.
And obviously that's really bad, and I hope that's not the mindset there. The less bad one would be, the tried and failed U.S. Monroe Doctrine, still very popular with a lot of Americans, which says that basically under Monroe was that no European power should be meddling in the Americas. That was officially, and reality was that we had U.S. businesses basically controlling the Central Americas, what became known as banana republics. And it was a bad history. It was rightfully rejected by Americans, notably by the Republican Party of the 1920s, and it's regarded as a failed policy because the heavy hand created all kinds of instability and backlash against the United States. And we should not be looking to repeat that failed doctrine. It was not successful. There are no great notable successes to the Monroe Doctrine, and we should not go back to it. But even worse, we should not be justifying these Russian spheres of interest of invading and taking over our neighbors. We should have good relations. We should have good trade, and we should have prosperity. We don't need to rule.
Yeah, you don't need to rule when you have friends already.
Yeah.
You must be a better friend. You're going to be, I don't know. I don't get it. But I mean, I hope I share your view on that insofar as I don't think we should do that, but I don't agree with you because I think that they're doing that. And the reason I think they're doing that is because he says he wants to do that, because he stands up there and says, he refers to the Monroe Doctrine. And then he says, but these days we're calling it the Donroe Doctrine. And if you read the new national security policy, it basically is spelled out in that. And Marco Rubio steps up to the podium this past week and says, when Donald Trump says something, this shows he means what he says. You better believe him. And when I'm listening to a lot of other analysts out there, they're saying it's time to start to take this seriously. And there are still some people out there saying, oh, he's just joking about Greenland. I'm like, I don't think he's joking, and I'm pretty sure he's not joking about Canada. He would like to do it. I don't know if he'll be able to, but he would like to, and he's saying it. So I'm not nearly as optimistic as you, but I hope I'm wrong and you're right.
I wouldn't really color myself as optimistic on this one. I do think it's the Monroe Doctrine, and I think, that's awful. And we can just go back to history, why that failed. And I would even say that as a result of the Monroe Doctrine and the isolationism it caused is why we had World War II. And I think if taken too far, if we got caught in that mindset for another decade again, it would lead to World War III. But I don't think it's going to last that long. This is an election year. The American people are going to have their say again, and they don't like this. They don't want this. And there's going to be a backlash. And there's going to be a course correction.
I sure hope so, because I've been saying for a long time that I think this is where the Trump administration is in alignment with Russia and China, and I think that they're all three are working toward this, and that, in my view, will inevitably lead to conflict and war, because it destroys nation states by assimilating them. That's why in the thumbnail tonight I put President Trumpinator of Borg. He's a Borg because it's like, we will assimilate you. Resistance is futile. So there's that mindset. If he can achieve that, and I think we're on our way now. On the other side of it, some people are, I guess, still thinking that it's not serious.
It's very popular these days to attack globalism, to attack the liberal rules-based order. But those things have brought us a period of unrivaled prosperity and peace in human history. There's room for improvement still, but we do not want to go back to these spheres of interest and looking at our neighbors and saying, oh, that's mine too. Right?
Yeah.
If you want it, free markets, free trade says that, hey, if we want it, we can buy it.
Not only that,
Canada's making that. They'll sell it to us.
All this stuff about Greenland, it just seems completely unnecessary. If you're worried about security in the Arctic, we'll help you. Canada's got your back. Come on up. We'll work together. You don't have to invade us. You don't have to take us over. We're friends. We're on your side. I think it's pretty much the same with Greenland. We'll put more bases there. Do what you want, but don't take over our country. It just blows my mind. Why? You don't need to do this.
We've already got military bases in Greenland.
You do, yes.
Denmark is in NATO, as is Canada. It makes no sense from a security perspective. Conflict is only going to make us less secure.
Right.
And it takes the focus off the reason why we have insecurity in the first place, and that's Russia and China, right? We should be unifying with NATO countries to create a common defense. That's why it's there. And if you don't like NATO, I'm not its biggest fan. I would really like to see a NATO 2.0. But the idea of common defense is solid, right? Canada has not been involved in very many wars. Why? Because nobody wants to attack Canada. Because we've got common defense. The U.S. doesn't want to see anybody attack Canada. We're not going to stand it if Russia goes to invade Canada. And Canada's not going to tolerate it if Russia were to invade Alaska. So that common defense keeps us both safe, allows us to focus on our own prosperity. And, the more democratic countries we get involved in that, the more peace and prosperity we can have. And backing away from it is just a disaster.
Well, here's our prime minister today, and his words, I think, carefully chosen as well. He doesn't want to piss off Godzilla.
The Danish prime minister has said that any type of military force used to annex Greenland would be the end of NATO. Do you concur with that assessment?
Well, let me reiterate what I said to Mr. Noel, which is that the future of Greenland is a decision for Greenland and for Denmark exclusively. It's their decision. Secondly, from a NATO context, the way I would frame it is that the western flank of NATO, which would include Greenland, the Arctic, is, given the evolving threat environment, is an area that we as NATO, Canada obviously importantly, given our geography, need to invest more in. This is a point that we've been making in recent years and since I became Prime Minister that we've really stressed. And with our buildup that's just beginning of our military capabilities, we are making heavy investments in the Arctic. We'll be working with our Nordic partners. We'll be working through NATO. This is one of the issues I'll be discussing with the Secretary General as part of an ongoing discussion with him around this to further advance it.
Stephen Miller, who is a senior advisor to President Trump, has refused to rule out military force in the annexation of Greenland. Does that trouble you?
Well, I didn't see the specific comments that Mr. Miller may have made. Look, I'll take a step back. We're partners in NATO. It is a mutual defense alliance. We can provide that security. And when we look at a couple basic, there's basic principles here, which is self-determination of nations, sovereignty, territorial integrity. And then there is approaches that we have as partners to what we're trying to accomplish. And as NATO, we can provide security for all of NATO, Greenland included. And as the threat environment is changing, we're making the investments in order to do that, and we can operationalize and augment and build additional plans to do that. So, and that's what we will do. And we stand with Denmark. We stand with Greenland. Our closest partnership is with the United States, and we'll work with everybody to make sure that we move forward together. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
And Mike McCarrick joins us as well. And careful words chosen by our Prime Minister today.
Hi, David. Hi, Rick.
How are you?
I can't complain. It was warm where I am today, so I got some yard work done.
Oh, well, good for you, because we have freezing rain.
Oh, that's always fun.
Yeah. It's wonderful. It's slushy and crappy here, but yeah, good to have you here. And
I was outside in shorts and a t-shirt.
Oh. Yeah, no, when I'm out walking Cosmo, my mascot, we come back in, we're soaked and it's cold, so it sucks. That's Canada.
Yes.
You don't want to invade us. You don't want the weather. Trust me. It sucks. I've
known people that were stationed at, and I'm going to mispronounce this. I'd like to say it's Thule Air Force Base, or maybe Thule. It's spelled Thule. It's an American Air Force Base in Greenland. Mm-hmm. And I've known people that were stationed there, and you don't want to be stationed there either. It's cold and there's nothing there, and it's an important base for all of NATO, but you don't want to be stationed there.
Yeah. Well, our Prime Minister, you were kind of listening in there a little bit, and thanks for joining us, midstream here in the broadcast. We can kind of pivot back and cover a little bit of the ground that we covered before. Do you have any thoughts on Mr. Carney, or do you want to comment on anything else to open things up here?
I don't know where you guys were at, but if you're talking about Greenland, it makes exactly no sense for the United States to go in hard in Greenland. We're already there. We already have a military base there that we operate freely from. There are other sites that I'm sure that if we asked, we could just set up and work. I don't get it. We've used Greenland militarily since at least World War II, possibly earlier. It was one of the main shuttle routes to Europe for aircraft that they would go from, the Maine or New York up to Greenland and then over to Iceland and then over to the UK. I don't get it. I don't get why anyone would say, hey, let's invade Greenland. It makes exactly no sense.
Well, Stephen Miller said today that it's the United States has the right to take Greenland.
Am I free to insult Stephen Miller on your program?
You can. It's
Okay.
a free speech platform, sort of, almost, anyway.
Well,
He's
known to a lot of people in the U.S. David, let me know if you've heard this one as Pee Wee German. That he looks like what you would get if Pee Wee Herman and Joseph Goebbels had a baby. And so, yeah, Pee Wee German is that he has a lot of power inside of Trump's brain. And as he is the vice chief of staff at the White House, right? Am I remembering his job right? Something like that.
Yeah.
But he's not a Senate approved person. He doesn't have a whole lot of power. Mainly what he has is influence. And that doesn't extend very far outside of the diehard Trump world. One of the things that we're seeing out of the Venezuela thing is that Americans, our opinion of foreign intervention has changed since 2001, really since 2004, because that's when Iraq was obviously a bit of a mess up. I don't know if you showed that cartoon of the horse that I sent you.
No, I didn't show that. But yeah.
But there's a way to do it right if you're going to go in, like in Afghanistan or to a lesser extent Iraq, where it made a lot more sense than Venezuela or certainly Greenland. But it takes a lot on the back end. We can break things. The Venezuela operation was a model of lightning fast professionalism, of getting the job done extremely fast with an absolute minimum of casualties. And I think the highest casualties were military advisors from places like Cuba. I think Cuba reported that a lot of their military advisors had been taken out. And one of the big questions was, well, why were you in some of the highest security areas of Venezuela? That's a serious question. But the casualties were very small. As far as I know, no Americans were even hurt.
Ukraine reporting today, I think, Venezuela reporting, I think they said 24, which is actually lower than any of the other numbers I'd heard previous.
And a lot of those were probably either killed when we took out the SAM batteries, because there was a buck that was taken out. There was an older system that I'd like to say was an SA-3, but I might be wrong. I only saw some grainy video of it. Unknown if any of the newly delivered Russian Su-30s were taken out, but they were obviously not flying because we were in their airspace completely unmolested. It was a very professional operation. So in that sense, it hurts Russia a great deal because it shows how utterly incompetent Russia has been in Ukraine. Because we were able to go into a nation, find their leader, and take him out alive in handcuffs with a minimum of casualties. And I believe the operation lasted 2.5 hours total. And that includes flight time for when the helicopters were feet wet. And helicopters don't fly very fast. Feet dry is when you cross over into land. Feet wet's when you go back over the ocean. It was a professional operation. It was quick. We did exactly what we needed to do. We did it very fast. We made sure that as few people as possible were hurt, and then we got out. The problem comes because we were able to do this just fine in Iraq and Afghanistan as well. The problem comes with the back end. What do you do once you broke it? Because we took their president And now you've got the vice president, that guy's vice president still in charge. All of the thugs that kept him in power, that negated the past 2 elections that he lost, are still in power. All of the Cuban, Russian, Chinese, and Hezbollah, and possibly Hamas thugs that are in that government and in that nation are still there and in power. So while we got Maduro out in very quick operation, what do we do with the back end? And I don't know if you covered that thing where Trump was verbally saying he wasn't going to get the people that actually won the last 2 elections back into power. Machado, and the other one that I can't pull off the name. But she won in, I believe, 18, and there was another guy that won in 24, but the 2 of them are connected. So, but there was talk of those not being put in power. So I don't get what the plan is, because if the plan was to make Venezuela into a not, bad nation led by thugs that oppress their own people and commit crimes on the order of, Saddam Hussein is a good comparison. What did we actually do? Does that make sense? So there's a lot of questioning in the United States from the voters, the citizens, about what did we actually do. If we're going to go in hot, are we going to do it right? Or is it going to cause more trouble, a month from now, 5 years from now? One of the things obvious in 2004, as somebody that was active duty military at the time and was watching all of it happen, was Saddam Hussein, as bad as he was actually an early ally of the United States against Al-Qaeda after 9/11. Because one of the things Saddam could not tolerate was dissent inside of his own country. He wanted to be that Islamic leader of the entire Islamic world. That was one of his fantasies. And so Al-Qaeda had exactly 0 presence inside of Iraq. As soon as a cell would open up, it was brutally put down and eliminated by Saddam Hussein. So when we broke that, when we took out Saddam, and then instead of co-opting the leadership to help run the country, we dismissed their military, and there all sorts of mistakes happened, and all of a sudden we were left with what started as AQI, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which was so extreme that Al-Qaeda excommunicated them, and they became what is ISIS and is still with us. What is this? We invaded in 2003, so we're talking 23 years later that we're still dealing with our failure on the back end, where you can break it, but there's that back end of occupation and pacification and rebuilding that takes a lot more effort than the initial attack did. So that was that cartoon that I sent you. It was over text. So
yeah, there was a picture of a horse where it was like
beautiful on the back end, and the hooves were detailed, and it was finely shaded. Yeah. And the closer you got to the head, the more it looked like a kindergartner drew it. And so the back end was the initial attack, and the stick figure head was what our current plans are for what comes after.
Yeah, I don't think there is a plan. I haven't heard a plan. There's no stated plan. He claims to, I think, have a plan, but
they've stated like 3 plans. And so it's like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they do, which is not reassuring.
And they left the rest of the government in place there. So they haven't
all
removed.
The bad guys. Yeah, they removed one bad guy and his wife. And from what I can tell, she was also a bad guy. But there are hundreds, if not thousands, of horrible people that we left in power, in authority, in places to crush dissent. So in places to crush a free Venezuelan government that might actually be very friendly to the United States. So
I just don't see how this is a win for the United States, honestly.
It depends on what happens after, and I'm not sure they had a plan.
I'm not even sure on the front end it's a win, because I think this has created more tension between the United States and its allies. It's putting people on edge. People are worried about the way this was done without working with other countries or creating a coalition or even stating what your goals are up front. We want to bring democracy to Venezuela. You're not hearing any of that. It's just like, we want the oil. He's coming right out and saying it. And I don't think anybody's sympathetic towards that. So it's just not, for the MAGA base, they can beat their chest and say, yeah, we did it, Department of War. But I just don't see how it's a win for the United States of America tonight after all this. And I see it only getting worse for the people in Venezuela. Maybe Trump won't suffer because I think it will filter out of the news cycle and fall off the radar for Americans. So the average voter maybe won't pay any attention, but he's created a power vacuum. He's destabilized things. We've seen gunfire in the streets overnight, drones overhead, shots being fired. Doesn't make any sense. Don't know why. Things are, to some degree destabilized there. And you have the risk now of it erupting into more chaos where the people will suffer. And I think that's just really bad again. And that won't look good on the U.S., certainly not on Trump, right? For having done this. So I don't know, man. I just
if we had gone in with a little bit more cooperation. So Colombia is obviously also a drug trafficking nation, but they've been working with the United States for several decades now. We've been able to operate jointly with the Colombian military to go after drug cartels. And this is not news. This is 20 years old, decades of history. Colombia is one of our closest allies, and Trump insulted the president of Colombia when he was like, maybe this should have been better. And he was a little bit more forceful than that, but it was nothing, more hyperbolic than that. It was, so I don't get why and then Trump goes back and insults him because Trump can't handle the criticism. But back to the U.S. voters, David, I don't know if you saw that poll that came out today. I believe it was a Reuters poll, but it was something like 64% of American voters are not in favor of what just went down. And some of the diehard MAGA voters are barely in the plus column, but everybody else, obviously the anti-Trump people are not going to be thrilled for the most part. I'm not going to cry over Maduro leaving, but I'm a little annoyed at how it went down. But the independents that put Trump over the top in 24 are hard against it. And so when you're talking about even on the completely cynical calculus of does this help Trump, because he's facing so many simultaneous scandals with the, his age and feebleness and the Epstein files and, count the other dozen, festering sores on the Trump administration. But I don't think this helps Trump. I think this goes to one of the hardcore MAGA things, which was no foreign interventions. We don't want a repeat of 20 years of war in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it goes against the anti-Trump voters. It goes against the independents that want sensible rule, and maybe he should be addressing the economy at home rather than going and playing games in Venezuela. So I don't see how this is a win for Trump, even on the cynical, did it successfully distract from any other scandals? I think it just added another reason why independents and some of the Republicans are going to oppose him now. And the November midterms this doesn't help him at all.
Go ahead, David, if you have anything to add. You've kind of commented on this stuff earlier, but maybe elaborate.
Yeah, no, we talked about it earlier. Yeah. And as I said, I looked at that poll and I was surprised that only with Hispanics, there was only a plus 7% bump. Honestly, I expected that Hispanics would be more favorable of deposing Maduro, but it isn't. And that's not going to be a lasting bump. When they see that the same Chavista government is still in control, that's going to go down as the days continue. I think this, it was a very successful and desperate ploy to change the news off of the economy and off of Epstein. And so now he's got new news, but yeah, I agree with Mike. I don't think this really helps him in the long run. Short-term distraction at long-term cost. This is a midterm election year. All the focus has to be there. Honestly, at this point, he's just got to keep Congress distracted enough that they don't impeach Bondi over the Epstein files, because that's the bad news that is probably coming up. Other news that we didn't cover today is that the Republican lead in the House has narrowed. There have been some Republican representatives who have died recently. There is not a sure election to replace them with more Republicans. So effectively, the majority in the House is cut down to about one right now. Mm-hmm. And not all of them are on board with the Trump agenda. So it's getting more and more precarious for the Trump administration this year. And I will be surprised if there is not an impeachment of either Bondi or Hegseth this year.
I think the Hegseth stuff was not successfully distracted from because Hegseth started going after Mark Kelly in very public ways. And that doesn't sit well with a lot of people. When you're talking about a combat veteran that flew 39 combat missions in A6, flew 4 space shuttle missions, 2 as the commander. He's a retired officer grade 6 Navy captain. These are some of the most highly respected types of accomplishments in American society. And Hegseth going after him for something that was obviously factual that he said it makes no sense. And so there's Republican senators that are saying this is perhaps not something you should be doing. Some of them were a little more forceful than that. But yeah, if David's talking about Hegseth might be on the way out, that's I'm not going to argue if Whiskey Leaks Pete is going to get out. But
he's been on very precarious ground this entire year with scandal after scandal.
From Whiskey Leaks on the
going after a senator like this, if you're a sitting congressman, you don't want to invite anyone to go after a sitting congressman, especially like this, because if it's fair game for the Republicans to demote a former serviceman, then it'll be fair game for Democrats to demote former Republican servicemen. And there's a lot more Republican veterans in office than Democrat veterans.
Senator Tom Cotton, there's several others.
Yeah. So, I really suspect that this may be a move that backfires on Hegseth this year. There are already Republicans in the House saying that he should be removed, who have discussed impeachment. And this just further weakens his own position. And I was already saying that, if Bondi's impeached, then I expect Hegseth to be impeached soon after. But this type of stuff, it's kind of running neck and neck. And if you're Trump, this is one of the worst things you can have happen to you leading it into the midterms, to the point where you 86 them before it leads to impeachment. But the issue with Trump is that, Trump 2.0, in Trump's first term, he had a lot of professionals who were experts at what they did. And he really disliked that because Pence did not support him. People did not back him the way he wanted to. So for his second term, he's just gone for loyalists. And the thing about loyalists is that if you're standing by Trump, then Trump's standing by you. But Stephen Miller, Hegseth, these people are really hurting Trump politically. They are not popular in Congress. They are not popular with Americans. They're hurting his reelection chances. And, if Democrats do take a majority of the House and Senate, then we are going to see impeachments next year. Trump is warning of that for good reason. It's going to happen. And it's going to happen because they've done things that are impeachable offenses. They don't stop being an impeachable offense just because a year passes. So this is very serious, and Trump's going to have to decide if he's going to stand by them, even if it costs him everything.
Well, and one thing about Trump is he is not what anybody would call a good leader. Loyalty only goes one way with him. It only goes up to Trump. Loyalty down from Trump is a rare thing. So if Hegseth is causing Trump problems, then I would say that Hegseth might be gone. But you're right about Trump's first term, and some of my favorite, well, at least one of my favorite people was actually in Trump's first term, because Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis was an excellent Secretary of Defense. He did all sorts of good stuff. He was a fantastic thing for the military on several counts. But he resigned over the first impeachment, the attempt to coerce and bribe then new President Zelensky and some other Ukrainians to begin investigations into Joe Biden. And Jim Mattis was not a fan of that. So, this is a huge change where you've got somebody that's extremely competent, like former General Jim Mattis, resigning over bad actions from Trump and doing so publicly, versus, Whiskey Pete that can't even figure out how to use secure lines of communication.
Mm-hmm. We've already touched on this, but do you have any comments on what happened today with the meeting of the Coalition of the Willing and these security guarantees that they've talked about, and UK and France saying they would put forces into Ukraine if there's a ceasefire?
We'll see how this goes. I believe Russia has been, they tried to torpedo the peace process with the fake claim that Ukraine had gone after Putin's residence. I believe the CIA briefed Trump that was not true. At least that's what I read in the news. But one of the red lines for Russia is Western troops inside of Ukraine. At least that's what I've been reading. I don't know that for a fact, but that's what I've been reading. But this is one of those things that this isn't going to end. Ukraine's not going to be willing to end. We discussed this last time I was on, or at least I mentioned it, that Ukraine's seen this before. They saw it in 1994 with the Budapest Memorandum. They saw it in the late 90s, I'd like to say 97 or 99, for the Treaty of Friendship between Ukraine and Russia. There's been several more on that list that there's been written and signed security guarantees given to Ukraine that mattered not at all in both 2014 and 2022. And so what Ukraine is saying is that it is better to fight this horrible, deadly war than it would be to sign another one of these peace agreements that's just going to cause more trouble down the road. That any sort of peace agreement that does not have hard security guarantees, and we're talking Western military forces inside Ukraine, or at least extremely well built up Ukrainian defenses with Western weapons, Ukraine's not going to go for it for good reason. So if Russia's willing to do that, I don't think they are, but it's a hard line for Ukraine. So I don't see this peace process going anywhere. I think we're just going to keep fighting.
Anything to add, David? I know you talked about this earlier. Just not going to bring Putin back.
Yeah, as I said earlier, for Putin, this actually discourages him from the peace process, because if there are French and British troops, nuclear-armed European powers, that's a line that he's not going to want to cross in the future. So he's got to meet all of his ambitions now. For Putin, there was always an option to temporarily cease fire, rebuild Russian forces, and go at it again. But this, French and British troops will take that off the table. So he's going to be less inclined to sign anything because he still hasn't met his objectives in Ukraine.
Well, and you mentioned that France and the UK are nuclear powers. The United Kingdom's nuclear weapons have a lot of American partnership with them, the special relationship with the UK. Their main nuclear weapons are in Trident D5 missiles on their submarines, and that's an American weapon system. The French, however, have their own domestic nuclear weapon system. So there is, aside from basic technological help and then like NATO standard interoperability and communication channels, all of the French nuclear weapons are entirely French. So Yeah, and France has a competent military. France has its own problems, but yeah, these are serious. The UK and France inside of Ukraine, that's a serious security guarantee.
Totally different topic, and I noticed that you just referenced this briefly in one of the emails you sent to me today. It's the anniversary of J6.
Yep, happy Insurrection Day to both of you.
And 5 years on, I still see competing narratives out there, and where do you think this leaves the country in terms of division and conflict? After all this time, still not resolved, and where do you think we're at?
Do you want to hit it first, David, or?
Sure. Yeah, we're still more divided than ever. I note that there was supposed to be a plaque to the police officers from January 6th that was supposed to go up in the Capitol, and it's been reported missing, saying they don't know where it is. And the White House has changed on their website the descriptions of what happened on that day. Obviously, they're building a narrative, but I'm not sure at this point that this really helps them. There are people who are really committed to Trump, and they're not going to change their opinion, whatever. But for other people, your moderate Republicans, they just see this administration distancing itself from the truth. Same with independents. So really, this is hurting Trump going into the midterm elections. The far left, the far right, they're entrenched. They don't change their opinions. But middle America really cares, and they do want some basic level of honesty. And this is just further going to push Trump, further push them away, further divide the country, and it's going to hurt Trump again in November. We're really just, the actions that he's doing keep backfiring, and we're going to have what looks like a landslide for the Democrats in November. Now, the big question is going to be on top of that, not only if the Democrats win, but which Democrats win. So we'll see. Yeah. The Democratic Party is not any more a monolith than the Republican Party, just as, we have your Bush-Reagan conservatives and your Trump MAGA Republicans. We have different factions in the Democratic Party, and the country can look very different depending on which one carries the day in November.
Yeah. I would like to point out, and America has been noticing, certainly independents, anybody in the center, has been noticing that something like 1,600 January 6th insurrectionists were pardoned by Trump early on. It might have even been one of those first day executive orders. 1,600, and these include nearly 200 that were either convicted, pled guilty, or were facing sentencing of some sort for assaulting police officers, which is something that people in the center of America are not big fans of. But out of those people, several dozen of them have also been rearrested for further crimes. Some bad stuff too, like domestic assault, child pornography, all sorts of bad things they've been rearrested on. But here's the weird thing. They finally caught the bomber that set pipe bombs at Democrat and Republican locations in D.C. But the legal thinking that I've been reading is that Trump pardon covers him. So they arrested him, but he would have a completely incompetent defense team if they didn't point out. They're saying, look, my client has been pardoned by the president, and this legal proceeding is null and void because the pardon covers him. And the writing of that pardon was very expansive. So this is something that at least people like me are paying attention to. It's kind of a big deal. The thing with, as a veteran, where he granted Ashley Babbitt military honors and several $1 million to her family, really sticks in my craw. as a veteran who, put the uniform on and the oath actually meant something to me. There's a lot of veterans like that. And when they see somebody like Ashley Babbitt do something incredibly stupid and illegal and pay the stupid price for it, and then for Trump to be on her side, that's not doing him any favors. So there's all sorts of things about January 6th that they don't sit well with the voters that actually will win some candidate the election. These are the voters that candidates have to appeal to, at least in statewide elections. Some of the districts in the House might be different. So yeah, it's not doing them any favors. And like David said earlier, just because Trump said something and the pardons actually will mean something, but there's a lot of things that Trump's trying to rewrite the narrative on this that aren't going to stick. And just because he says it now doesn't mean a year from now and 2 years from now and 3 years from now, it's not going to come back.
Yeah. I also want to build on another thing. You're talking about the police and police families demographically are very much Republican voters, right? And so when you are condoning attacking police officers, Capitol police officers, or state police officers, or just making their lives more difficult, you are attacking a Republican base of voters and alienating them and making things far more difficult for them. And I'm definitely seeing that split among Republicans. Now, there's some police families that see Trump as being good for the police, good for ICE, Border Patrol, and other groups. But things like this, pardoning those who've attacked police officers is very bad for his election chances. And personally, I just find it to be an immoral action as well. People might be justified in a political protest, and it might be right to pardon some of the people on January 6th, but it's definitely not right to pardon those who attacked police officers who were just trying to keep the peace. So the blanket pardons are going to have another backlash on Trump. And it's just, once again, another case of this administration not really thinking through its actions.
Well, that gets us to the top of the hour. And I think we've covered most of, if not all of the ground that we intended to tonight. But is there anything else that you guys think deserves attention tonight?
Yeah, there's one more thing. There's a lot of different stories coming out of this Trump administration with various actions with different countries. I'll definitely say that there's two voices that have been kind of loud and having different views. One is Stephen Miller, who we mentioned before, but the one who continues to be kind of more the voice of reason is Marco Rubio, who's saying different things. And we're just going to see kind of which. They both kind of seem to be sitting on Trump's shoulder, whispering in different advice, and we're going to see in the near future which one's going to prevail. Right now, unfortunately, it looks like Stephen Miller, but I really believe that there's a hard limit to how far that can go.
Mike, thoughts?
It was good seeing the CIA push back on the Putin claim of Ukrainian attack on his residence, because with Tulsi Gabbard, one of those people in that sort of national security agency loop, I believe Marco Rubio's technically in charge of all those things, but I believe Tulsi Gabbard's director of national intelligence, DNI. But she works underneath the National Security Advisor, which is one of Rubio's two hats. But she's nutty to, not pull any punches there. But it was good to see them pushing back because the now familiar pattern of Trump talking to Putin right before, like immediately before he talks to Zelensky. And that was obviously shown by his own hand-chosen loyalist that Putin was not being truthful. I think that actually has gotten under Trump's skin a couple of times. Certainly in the last 6 months when Trump has verbally stepped away from Putin. not as forcefully as he should. But for, Trump, it was kind of a seismic shift. It was hearing Trump criticize Putin was weird. So that at least gives me some hope that there are people in this administration that aren't entirely crazy, and maybe at least a little bit competent. The Venezuela, I think, was a mistake, but it is important to understand that there are many layers of this, that there's parts of it that are good and parts of it that are bad. The advertising of the extreme competence of the American military isn't a very good thing, especially as it shows the extreme incompetence of people like Russia. That was a good thing. But we'll see how this plays out, because it could be a complete disaster. And the good thing that I mentioned might be transient and fleeting, and 6 months from now, nobody's going to care. So, yeah, there's a lot of up in the air going on. We're still waiting on the rest of the Jack Smith things. The second part of his report is being held up by Judge Eileen Cannon. That was the part about the classified documents. I don't think that went away. I think the administration tried to bury it on New Year's Eve, but it was so explosive. And Jack Smith is such an effective prosecutor and spokesperson that I don't think that one's going away. I think even trying to bury it, it was loud enough that a lot of people stood up and noticed what he said. So yeah, there's a dozen festering sores on the Trump administration right now, and it doesn't necessarily look good for him.
Okay. And with that, thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time to join us tonight. I send some of that warm weather up here.
Trying.
Okay, folks. And tomorrow night, for all you Maverick viewers out there, back to the ostriches. I'm sorry. I apologize. We're going to talk to some of the local residents up there who are still not happy with the way some of the things went down and the impact that crazy circus has had on their community. So we're going to talk to some of those folks, and we're going to dig into some information in the nights ahead. That will be a series of interviews with, I think, some surprising revelations, and the weirdness just continues. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on The Flip Side. See you then.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.